McDavid ends up winning the Conn Smythe. Despite being on the losing team, he's the first player to have that happen since 2003 when J.S. Shiger did it, the goaltender for the Mighty Ducks. The big controversy is that McDavid did not register a point in games 6 or 7 of this series. I want to ask you guys, would you have voted for McDavid?
I don't know. It's a tough one. I'm not like horrendously upset at the decision. I'm also not very surprised at all at the decision. Um, it's one of those things where it's kind of a subjective thing. Like, I mean, this is voted on by just a bunch of like NHL like heads. So it's kind of it of course it's going to be McDavid in this situation. Like he sniffed Gretzky's record a little bit, and he's already the NHL's baby. So like I'm not surprised he got it. But again, I'm also not that bothered by it. Like he did have an incredible postseason. There's no getting around that. Yeah, you could say, he didn't show up in the two games that mattered most. Sure, but also he could have just not showed up at all after they were down 3-0, and he fucking put the team on his back basically, and steamrolled them back, helped get the stone rolling to steamroll them back to a game 7. So I think there's something to be said there. Um, I don't know. I'm okay with him winning it. Could it have been Bob or Barkov? Sure. I think any three of those, I wouldn't have been really that upset either way.
I don't think you could really entertain anyone outside of those three for who was going to win it. And I knew as soon as Bettman started talking, when he was like, "Who's been the best player for the whole playoffs?" I was like, "Okay, it's 97. It's over. This is a lock." When I mean, I'm fine with it. I don't really see anything wrong with it one way or another. I feel like maybe he could have said something prior to just like dropping the name, like it's the first time in 20 years that someone from the losing team is going to win this, just to give the people of Florida a little bit of a heads up. But, it is what it is at the end of the day. Guy had, like you said, Mac, an unbelievable playoffs, close to record-setting playoffs. I mean, for in terms of what we've seen in our lifetime, that was probably the best postseason by an individual. So I'm fine with the decision.
I will also say, like, you're not going to find a single player on the Panthers, and you're not going to find a single real fan of the Panthers that gives a shit about this. Like, they won the cup. No one who's like a true hockey fan should be like barking, being like, "I'm still pretty upset Barkov didn't get it," or something. Like, just you won the cup. I don't give a fuck.
I also
So
like
in
I think that's a great point. It's like playoff MVP is great. Congratulations, but like is it an award anyone really wants to win in the hockey world? Sure, might be nice to add to your resume, but I feel bad for the Conn Smythe sometimes because it's such a cool trophy and you're like, get that thing out of the way and give me the big one.
Yeah, it's like you don't want the attention, right? You see guys who they don't even want to look at it. They hand it off to someone. They're like, all right, now let me get to the cup kind of
Right.
thing. Um, Great breakdown, but naturally you guys did the nice guy thing where I asked you if you were gonna vote, if you would have voted for McDavid, yes or no, and I still kind of want to hear a direct answer here.
Yes, I would have.
I think if you asked me right after the game ended last night, I would have said yes, I would have. But like after mulling it over a little bit more today, I still think Bob deserved it.
So I will say yes because I have to give a yes or no, but I am starting to hear the other side a little more than I was last night. It's kind of a weird subject. I listened to 32 Thoughts this morning and Merrick was going off. He's like, this is a playoff award, not a game 6 and 7 award. He was the best player in the playoffs. But then you go to the complete flip side, and Josh Yo, who's a Penguins beat writer, tweeted this last night, and it has 700,000 views and got a lot of people upset. He said, many will disagree, but I have a real problem with the MVP vote. McDavid is one of the best players of all time. He was brilliant, but he had no points in the last 2 games. was particularly quiet in perhaps the biggest NHL game of this century, and his team lost.
So that to me is critiquing the game, not
Yeah.
MVP of the playoffs. Do you see what I'm
Yes.
saying? Like,
Right, but like the playoffs came down to the game.
right. But I mean,
Fair.
like, if we're gonna go with who was dialed the most throughout the playoffs, I mean, Bob had off games. So did Barkov, you know.
Well,
I
and
don't know.
here,
Yeah,
but by the argument of the first thing you said too, like it's a playoffs award, not a game 6 and 7 award. That by that argument, Bob should have won it because it's a playoffs award, not a games 4, 5, and 6 award. And he's still like what? How many games he allowed 2 or less goals this entire
played great.
postseason?
Yeah.
Multiple shutouts, including game one of I said this, I think, at the beginning of the postseason. Game one is like game seven. It's the same fucking thing. People don't want to hear me on that argument. Game one is game seven. And he shut them out in game one.
I definitely think using that logic, maybe I wouldn't vote for Bob over McDavid just because of the pure dominance. But yeah, it probably would have made a better case for Bob. I mean, for those who don't know, McDavid was one vote away from being unanimous. Every single person voted for him besides
Yeah.
See,
one.
that's what surprised me a little bit, although I shouldn't be that surprised because again, a lot of these NHL people are just such suck offs that it's like
I'm part of me is wondering if so much of this backlash is just down to like if this was a more common occurrence, like if a player from the losing team won the Conn Smythe, like I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever, then I think it wouldn't have gotten as much flack. But for a lot of hockey fans, this is the first time they're ever seeing that. I mean, Jiggy was 20 years ago, so you've got teenagers that, probably or 20 something year olds that probably don't even remember when that happened. So I'm wondering if that factors into it, but I was a little bit surprised just by the sheer amount of backlash that was thrown his way because of that.
okay, so he won it, whatever. Maybe he should have, maybe he shouldn't have. Can we now talk about the other controversial part of this? Because I
Yes.
think this is even more interesting, arguably.
Yeah, so Batman does his speech. He announces it's McDavid, and Jaguar's the only time in my lifetime this has happened. He came out and got the trophy back in '03. McDavid chose not to come back onto the ice and receive the trophy. He stayed in the locker room with the boys, and that had its own set of controversy online. This poor guy, he loses game seven and just wants to be with his teammates, and the whole thing goes up in flames. So I want to ask you guys, do you have a problem with him not coming out of the locker room as the face of the NHL when everybody's watching to receive the Conn Smythe trophy?
I think you should go first for this one.
Fine, team me up. No, I don't have a problem with it. I don't.
I don't either.
Why not though? Let's hear that.
I don't because one, as the captain of a team, I feel like you should be prioritizing the mental wellness of your team over your own personal accolade.
Which we clearly saw him do as he waited. He was the
Right.
last guy off the ice. He literally waited. He could have gone right down the tunnel. A lot of other star players would have. He waited. Every single Oiler passed, got off the ice. He tapped him on the back, and then he left.
Right. And two, do you want the face of your league that everyone's going to see going out to put his face in front of a trophy that he truly doesn't want and doesn't give a fuck about and is probably going to have a meme made about him for the rest of his life if he does it? I mean, I don't know. I don't have a problem with it. I'm not saying that he did the right or wrong thing. Like, I don't, it's a little bit of a gray area, but I don't have an issue with it.
I just like I don't know the ins and outs of this or if this is accurate or not, but it felt like when Jiggy won the Conn Smythe, he was still on the ice when the trophy came out. Like it felt like this took like 20 minutes in between end of game yard sale with the equipment, then they do the handshake line, and then after like 5 or so minutes, the Oilers go off the ice, and then 10 minutes later, Bettman does the Conn Smythe thing. So I feel like had the Oilers still been close to on the ice or had it been a little bit sooner. But I figured at that point, dude, like he's in the locker room, coach is talking, he's talking, gears off. Like they're probably just, I feel like once you go into that locker room, it would just be so cruel to make him come out. Panthers fans would probably boo. I mean, they booed when they gave it to him anyways. To me, it's like it's already cruel enough that they made him do an interview and we had to watch that, which was very hard to watch. It would have been so fucked up, in my opinion, to have him come back out in his skates and do the little shuffle walk across the red carpet to pick up the Conn Smythe, to stand there and take a picture with it, and then to carry it back off into the locker room.
Yeah, I hear all that for sure. And I honestly I don't really have a side in this argument. I just thought it was a really interesting debate on Twitter, seeing both sides. To play devil's advocate, though, I am gonna read a tweet from somebody that's on the complete opposite side, which was in relation to Jaguar winning it. And there's a photo of him in what was it, 03. With it, clearly looks pretty fucking defeated holding it. And it just says how much you want to bet Jaguar wanted to be anywhere else in the world at this moment rather than accepting this award. This is what class, character, and sportsmanship is. McDavid no-showed the Conn Smythe like a tantruming child, just like he no-showed game 6 and 7. Hashtag let's go Oilers. Which is
Ooh,
pretty brutal. Pretty
that's
brutal.
that's rough.
I don't think we've like ever seen McDavid show enough emotion to be considered throwing a tantrum, but
Yeah, that's probably true too. I mean, I think it also comes down, Nick, you touched on a little bit. We don't really know the logistics of it. Like, I kind of have a different opinion on it based on like, was he literally getting off the ice and somebody tapped him and was like, by the way, stay here, you won CS? Or did he get all the way in there and 20 minutes later they're like, "Hey, you won CS. Are you going back out?" And he's like, "Fuck no." I don't know when that happened, and we're
right.
probably never going to know. Um,
Yeah, and the other thing, to play devil's advocate, again, I just voiced my opinion, but if you're someone who's in the marketing department for the NHL, you're probably kicking and screaming because all you ever want is attention on your sport. You
yeah,
finally get millions and millions of eyes on the game.
yeah,
Everyone's watching till the end because it's close. And there's a lot of people like Dan Orlovsky, the NFL Network analyst, who's tweeting like this McDavid guy. I want to see him. Like, see it.
right.
They probably want McDavid's face out there for people to see because that's what's marketing the league, right? But
I
I
get
don't,
it. I mean,
I don't blame him. I don't.
no, I wouldn't have come back out. I mean, it would have taken a lot to get me to go back out there after something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate how opinionated people have gotten on just whether he should have won it and then how he should have handled it when he won it. It's just like give the guy a break. Jesus.
Or argue about something that like actually matters.
I will
Yeah.
say, and I had a long debate with my dad and my sister because I put that tweet in the chat with my dad and my sister today, and I just was like, "What do you guys think about this?" And they were on opposite sides of the argument, and I was just kind of like eating popcorn while listening to the whole thing. But my dad made a good point too that he said like, as far as he understands, the only award that like the only individual award that players really like give a lot of weight to is the Ted Lindsay because that's voted on by the players. So that's like kind of a really big like
Yeah.
compliment versus they're like, we don't really care what everybody else thinks.